Jordan Bergtraum is the head of product at Utilize Core, a platform that automates service management. Prior to Utilize Core, Jordan was head of product at EquipID, a global SaaS provider in the facilities equipment intelligence space, and the VP of product at Service Channel, a SaaS platform to source, procure, manage, and pay for repair and maintenance services from commercial contractors. Really excited to have Jordan joining us today, sharing his insights into how he prioritizes his team's development, growth, and the creation of best practices through mentorship and training.
Thank you, Scott. Good morning and possibly afternoon. Get the most out of your PM team. I know that sounds fairly straightforward, but I'm definitely going to get into a lot of soft skills around this idea, is how on an individual level, less so about teams as a whole, but the individual people that either work with you, for you, or you partner with, even outside of the product management world, how to actually get the most out of them as their either manager or partner. Yes, this becomes a little easier if you're their manager for all the obvious reasons. Let's talk a little bit about my background, just so you can understand where I'm coming from. I've been about 16 years totally in B2B SaaS and really enterprise level. So those are the kinds of customers that are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on the subscription, sometimes even in the millions, depending on their scale. So keep that in mind. My lens often is not B2C, but B2B and enterprise. I've also spent 10 years leading teams, which really meant taking responsibility for the overall product management function and the people within those departments, ranging from other product managers, product owners, business analysts, UX, project management at times. It depended on the role I was in. I've also been all over the map in terms of the industries I've worked in. As you can see, I've done everything from education, legal, and now, and most recently, facilities management. And these things don't have a lot in common at all. So I'm quite used to coming into domains new and having to pick up that domain pretty quickly. And twice I've come in to organizations that really did not have formal product management. They might have thought they did, but I can promise you they didn't. And in some situations, they knew they didn't. And that's exactly why they were hiring me, to be the leader and first product person, and then prove out the value of the function, and then hire up a team after that. And so this means some of the traditional things I think you would assume would be part of product management, everything ranging from researching a market to helping with the product marketing, the messaging, generating product roadmaps through some of that research, and of course, the product delivery aspect of our role. So let's get a little bit about how I'm going to structure this presentation and a little bit of what you'll get out of it. I'm going to walk through what I think is a common and typical problem. I'll then discuss some solutions and many solutions around that. And then I'll also have what I like to call the reality check, where theory is always a lovely thing, but there's always the practicality of what works in the real world and what barriers sometimes exist to implementing a nice theory. So let's dive into what I perceive as a problem. Product management as a function might be one of the broadest roles I've ever come across in my professional career, in seeing where I've worked, talking to other people out in the world and what their role is. So let's just start to look at what some of these things look like. You have to be able to interview people, do win-loss analysis. We do competitive intelligence. We do what we call ideation, prioritization, road mapping, communication. I think you're beginning to get the idea of how broad all these things, okay, pricing, user research. I think you get my point. If we're doing the job, in my opinion, right and broadly, and you're responsible for all of it, and you're not only responsible for part of this, let's say you're running a product function, this is a lot of things that you need to be good at and be doing and expected to do at a pretty high level. So it can be overwhelming to be good at all these things. And let's just keep that in mind. How many different things there are to be good at. Okay, let's get off that slide. Now, continuing with the problem, why is this such a problem is that breadth and that volume of things that people often are asked to do as part of being a product manager. First of all, few people are going to be interested in all of that. Who's going to love doing all of those things at that breadth? Because they're also so different. These are very different things. These are not the same skills. They do not fall into the same bucket of interest level. So let's just recognize that no one is going to love every single aspect of product management. And if they do, I want to meet that person. So you can shoot them my way, and I want to talk to them about the fact that they love every part of what I showed you on the prior slide. Now, it's one thing not to love it all, but it's even harder to actually do all those things at a high level. Let's say the expectation is do all parts of your job at an A level. I have personally no expectation that is ever going to be possible out of any single human being. And again, if you know that person who does all those things I just showed you at an A level, I want to meet them. And let's also just agree on a potential, probably pretty simple truth, which is people as human beings tend to want to do what they're good at. It's pretty natural to fall into doing what you like or what you're good at. And those two things tend to go hand in hand. And what that often means is it means not everyone's always doing what's most important because they're leaning into doing what they enjoy or what they're good at because that just feels good. So let's start diving right into some ways to address the fact that we got all these things to do and no one's going to really be doing them all really well. And they're also going to lean into doing what they like to do. So number one is let's try to understand what the people we work with or work for us enjoy, because that's the most likely thing they're going to be doing and want to do. So what do I mean by this is let's focus on, are they into strategy, or is it market research? Is it design? Is it the marketing part? So let's keep that in mind and identify early on what kind of interests they have at a bucketed high level. And I'll get into why that's going to be helpful a little down the road. Same thing. What are they actually good at? It's what they enjoy and what their strengths are. And often they're aligned, but not always, because some people are actually quite motivated by things that they're not actually good at because they find that challenging. So some people will lean into things that maybe they're not good at, but they still enjoy it. Now others, and it's pretty common, will definitely lean into the things that they have a strength in because that feels good to do something that you know you're going to do at an A level. And let's also talk about learning people's motivators. What gets them up in the morning? What gets them wanting to work hard, stay focused, put in maybe some extra hours? What is that? There are many different things that motivate people, and I'm just going to go through a few of them, not all of them. But some people are into just like changing people's lives, making their lives easier, better, faster, more enjoyable, having some positive impact on other people that are using their product in a constructive way. Other people might be overall company success. They're very tied into seeing the company as a whole do well. They want to see things like common metrics of revenue and retention just going well, getting new customers. Oh, another 5 new customers at $6 million of revenue. Others, not surprisingly, are somewhat motivated by their own personal financial reward, their compensation. Human thing to do, and nothing wrong with that. And if that's the case, that's something just to keep in mind when trying to understand people and how to motivate them. And the last one that I see is pretty common is some people are very motivated by just simple praise and recognition. When they do a good job, they want to know it, hear it, and maybe even have that be public knowledge. That's what's important to them. And sometimes it's a combination of these things. Okay, now that we understand some of these things about people that we work with or that are working for us, one thing to really start thinking about, and I don't think we think about this often enough as product people, is what product are you assigning people to? We tend to just look at it as bandwidth availability, next project on the list, and just lining people up that way. That is not going to lead to optimum output at all, because you might end up putting them on something, a project they don't have an interest in, that doesn't motivate them, that isn't their strengths, that isn't their likes. All the things I just spoke to you about, let's try to use what we know about these people to assign them to the right product. So here's just some high-level examples of what I mean by maybe thinking about what type of product it is. If it's a type of redesign product, perhaps if that person is like the artist type personality, that might be good for them. Great product, because they really are all about taking something that's existing and making it, the experience, much better. Or if it's a brand new product that's coming out, that's a strategy thing, is brand new. We don't really know what it's supposed to be, but we need someone to really just take this on. That could be a good project for those that think like strategists. Maintenance as a whole, we always are dealing with maintenance and you almost can't get away from it. It's great for task masters. If they're the type of person that gets great reward by checking boxes over and over, and every single day they want to see the value that they added by checking off that they, resolved a few defects, okay, or an enhancement or two, that project could be great for them because they get such great reward out of that checklist effect of looking every single day at the end of the day, knowing they made the product a little bit better, fixed a couple of bugs, and now our customers are happier. If you're really heavily into data, perhaps a good product or project for them might be business intelligence, data analytics, or potentially integrations, because that's so data heavy. Another way of looking at this as well is putting people in the proper role. So what do I mean by role? Product management is actually pretty broad. And yes, of course, the first thing you see here is, should they be a product manager? And what I mean by product manager is the difference between, let's say, product manager and a product owner, just in case people are a little fuzzy on the difference, or my definition. The product manager function is upstream. They're the ones that are typically answering the question of, what should we build next based on the problems that are best to be solved, that are going to move the needle the most. It's the what to build part. The product owner, if you have both roles, and often the product manager, by the way, is doing both of these, especially in smaller organizations, but the product owner function is the part of, how do we then take that idea from the product management side and build it right? So it's that classic, product managers are the right thing to build, product owner takes on the how to, and how do we build that right? So that's a lot of functionality, design, taking ownership of that, working closely with users to come up with an experience and set of rules in the product and functionality that makes the product work for the users. But also think about, should this person maybe be in UX? Some people get into product management, and ultimately where they really belong is design. They're actual designers. And look, UX is also broad. We can even think about the subsets of UX that they belong in as well, which I won't go into right now. And lastly, maybe what they're best at is project management. Some people also fall into product management only to really find out that what they really love is like being a taskmaster and doing things like figuring out the project management triangle and answering questions like, hey, what options do we have to bring timelines in? What's the impact of increasing scope? Hey, what's going to happen if I give you 2 more resources? What does that do in terms of timeline or our ability to take on more scope? Those kind of questions are very project management. And if that's what the person loves, that's probably where they belong. The point is, just because you're in product management as a whole, it doesn't mean like that you specifically have to stay as the traditional product manager role. There are subsets of this and other related areas that we should consider. Where does this person going to thrive? Another thing to think about is overall, maybe the right team. Product managers develop a broad set of skills and can start to get good at other parts of the business potentially. I'm a fan of having what I call cohesive teams, especially if you are managing a product team. I think connecting your PMs with the right people is super important. And what I mean by the right people could be anywhere from making sure they understand who the really strong salespeople are, Who are the strong client success managers? Those are two classic functions that product management should be internally very connected to. And look, we all know that takes you so far. And at the end of the day, you should be talking directly to your marketplace, whatever that looks like, whatever that is, directly, and not taking all feedback in from your CSM or sales, but from a getting the most out of people standpoint, helping people connect with other people that can help them be successful, super important to product managers. So what I mean by that is, think about, do they have the right connections, and are they tapped into engineering? Are they properly tapped into QA? And as I mentioned, sales and client success. So these are four pillars that they clearly and most likely need to be interacting with, maybe not every single day, but probably on a weekly basis. They are not having a conversation with one of these four groups, at least on a weekly basis. I would wonder how you're doing the job at a high level. So just make sure that a product manager is connected to the right people in all these teams. And another thing I'm a believer in is, because people have their particular strengths, leanings, desires, and interests, I think it's best to give people goals and not a particular process. Just set measurable expectations, tell them what they need to achieve, but then ultimately leave them to lean into the methods that work for them. It's going back to, people will lean into doing the things they like. Now, as we know, certain parts of the job just need to get done, whether you like it or not. And don't get me wrong, that's the reality check that you'll see it in a couple of slides down the road. Okay, when that task or project comes up that is not something that like they particularly love, let them do it their way, and they're more likely to do it and do it well, because it's their way and they're going to feel more in control of their life. If you tell them how to do it and you set very specific methodologies, you can imagine how limited they may feel, and that method doesn't really play into their strengths and interests. And I think you can start to imagine, think about yourself, how you'd react to that. So I think I'm a big fan of just saying, look, here's what I need you to get done by a certain time frame with a certain, let's say, quality metric. I understand quality can be hard to measure from a product perspective, but do your best to set that kind of concept and let them be. And the one bargain that they need to have with you as the person, let's say, setting that expectation, is that they need to raise issues back before they're unsolvable. That if they get themselves into trouble, or things aren't flowing the way it should, or they run into barriers or people that are in their way, or any of those things that like stop them from being successful, they need to raise that up to the right people early, as early as possible, not wait, not let themselves fail, right? So that's part of this outcomes, not methods bargain, is you give them the freedom, but they have to let you know, or someone, when they're running themselves into an area that maybe they need help with. So these are some things I already mentioned: giving them the freedom, letting them do it their way, not yours. As long as they're getting it done, okay, under the right time frame and quality, isn't that all you need to care about at the end of the day? I'm also a fan of what I call capability diversity. So what I mean by this is, if you look at a team, and especially a product team, don't expect every person to be the complete and thorough product manager. This all goes back to that early slide that had the 30 different things product managers have to do or might be doing. And it is just not a reasonable expectation for them to do all of those at an A level. But what you can strive, and I think is possible, is that if you look at the strengths across your team as a whole, that you have all those things covered from a team perspective at the minimum. That if you say, okay, there's the 30 things, and do I know at least one person that can do all of them at an A level? I think that's a really good start. Now, not to say it's easy to just like constantly be reassigning the expert in a certain area over here to a product or project that they're not really on. I get that that's not simple, but I still believe in the capability diversity because of the opportunity for cross-training. That's one of the primary things I like about it, that if, as long as someone on this product team is really good at and can do something at an A level, I am going to start to figure out clever ways to have them start training others on it. And that type of cross-training also can be really great for team development. Plus, it can be very valuable for the person doing the training as well, for them to feel like an expert in something. So part of your hiring plan does need to be to fill the gaps you've identified. If you've identified gaps, that next hire maybe should be specifically really good at those things that you have gaps in, skills that you feel you're not really at an A level, and nobody has A level skills. And look, I'm just going to say, if you have someone that can do it all, they are clearly a rock star. I've mentioned this before. It is so hard to find these people. I'm just reminding you, don't have that expectation that product people are going to be A-level players in all of those 30 things that product managers get involved in. All right. So now let's take a pause and have that what I like to call the reality check, and where the rubber meets the road, and the fact that, hey, this all sounds so great and these soft skills are amazing. They're just some parts of this that just might not be realistic. And number one, I just want to let everyone, absorb, and I understand as well, that in any job, and especially in product management, there will be certain things that you'll be doing, okay, on some days that are not fun for you, and you just got to do them. And as a manager, you got to assign out work that people will not enjoy, are not their strengths, and they got to do it anyway. And that is just life, right? That's just the way almost any job works. And it's a particular situation for product. And also, like I discussed, people's motivations, what motivates them, trying to figure that out. But sometimes that does fail, that we can't just simply use their classic motivators as a lever to get them to take on the unfun work and do it at an A level. It just does not always work. I recognize that. None of this is a magic bullet. Absolutely appreciate that. And sometimes, like I already mentioned, I'm a big believer that, especially in product management, there's sometimes just has to be a just do it mentality. Now, hopefully this is the minority of the time, right? That you have to just say to someone, sorry, we just got to do this. And if that's happening to someone too often, if you're getting the sense that they're just regularly feeling like all their job is just unfun, just do it kind of work, then maybe it's time to take a step back and ask the question, is this person in the right role, but even in the right department? Maybe product management is not their gig. And I'm not saying I'm a fan of just simply letting people go, but I've found often that just because you're not good at product management, a lot of the skills you learn can be transferable to some of the things I already mentioned, simple transitions into like product owner, project management, but even outside of that umbrella to client success. Sometimes product managers who are really good with clients make exceptional CSMs. I've seen product managers make transitions into sales. So if you're noticing that, the reality check of, I just feel like I'm constantly saying to them some phrase of, yeah, sorry, we just got to do it, right? Just part of the job. Maybe it's time to think about, is this the right place for them? And I'm looking at my watch and we do have time. So I'm going to give you what I call bonus content. Given how much we work with engineers and how much we rely on them for the output side of seeing our efforts, right? If the engineers don't build it, what we're doing doesn't have any value at all to anyone, right? A list of requirements does nobody any good if the engineers don't build it. So I think it's helpful to also talk similarly about the engineering function, because if we can find clever ways to keep them motivated, that only benefits us. That's why I get into this, is I think it absolutely benefits product to think a little bit about how engineers think. And I've worked with engineers now for almost 20 years. And I admit, I've never been an engineer. So just know I was never a professional software engineer. So you can take what I'm telling you with a grain of salt, but I've definitely worked with a lot of different engineers across a lot of different personality types, cultures, and I've learned a lot about what excites them. So first off, it's helpful to know what they enjoy. Same topic, figure out what they're into, but what they're into typically is different than what we're into. So are they into front end, or is it back end? Is it APIs, the middle tier, or is it more like straight up integrations? Also, so I quickly jumped into this next one. is what's their style? And trust me, when I say there are a lot of different styles of work with the engineers I've definitely worked with. Are they the collaborative type or lone wolf? And I'm sure many of you have met the lone wolf software engineer. Not uncommon, right? One of the reasons some of them go into engineering is because they are hoping the job is very much lone wolf style. The reality is when you're doing engineering at a high level, it's not the reality. Now, some roles are more lone wolf than others within engineering, but the point is recognize their personality type. It helps us when interacting to understand, are they naturally collaborative when we go reach out to them, or are they not? Are they a general or a soldier? And what I mean by this is, are they leaders or are they not? The reason why I bring this up is you might notice that there are a fair number of engineers in managerial roles that actually don't want to be managers. They really don't. But it's the only upward mobility they have to grow because there isn't a professional path for them. And this is definitely changing for sure. A lot of well-run engineering orgs have two career paths for them. So they don't force engineers into management that don't want to be managers, but a lot don't. So you might find that when you're dealing with an engineering manager, they may not be a great manager. They may not like it. They may not want to be responsible for other people, but they took the job because they were offered it. And who would say no to a promotion? Doesn't happen very often, especially in the absence of another way to take on more responsibility. So another thing I found when interacting with engineers, and this is coming from a person that was never a software engineer, but I personally found that I understood a lot about databasing and more than I ever realized. And it was a sort of like skill I had that I just stumbled into, realizing that I was good at it. And what I definitely realized is whenever talking to engineers, and this is particularly important for those of you that were former software engineers, unlike myself, if you were, only make suggestions to the engineers. Never tell them how to do it. Suggestions are fine. Specific instructions on how to build something don't do their job for them. I've noticed time and time again that will absolutely frustrate an engineer. It also can come across as you don't trust them to build it. And you gotta trust your engineers. You really do. You gotta let go, especially if you're a former software engineer and you know how to do it. I know how hard that is. I get it. But do your best to remember you're now a product person. You have a different role within the organization. Let the engineers do it their way. Also, similarly, respect the craft. They have very particular skills. They're highly valued skills typically, and absolutely show them that respect that they probably very badly want and don't often get. You give them that respect and you'd be surprised at how responsive they will be to the product function. This is super important if you're a former engineer, easy to fall into certain traps when dealing with them and giving them direction and not suggestions. Okay. That actually wraps this up. I've downloaded you with all sorts of information. And let me just give you the summary, the takeaways for you to really focus on and think about. So this is digestible. Remember, okay, think about what people like to do. What are they into? What parts of the role do you notice that they are leaning into? When left to their own devices, what kind of work are they doing? That's how you figure that out. Give them some space, give them a little bit of freedom, and then just see what they're doing. See what kind of work they typically are doing. That's a good indication of what they lean into and what they probably enjoy or are good at. Same thing. What are they good at? Similarly, like I just mentioned, what do they like? What do they enjoy? And what are they good at? Again, think about the whole idea of placing them in a role they're going to be successful in, a proper product, a proper role, and the right team, product, role, team. And lastly, just a reminder, think about giving them outcomes, not specific instruction on how to get there so they could do it their way and do it in a way that they'll enjoy and be successful at. And another just general thing is find value in everything people are good at. Again, so many things that are involved in product. Try to, instead of focus on what people aren't doing at the A level, focus on the things they are doing at the A level, and they'll be happier and you'll be happier. And that covers my summary and my talk. I want to thank everyone for joining and your time. Greatly appreciated.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. Really appreciate it. We'll jump into some time for Q&A here. If people have some questions, let us know. I'm going to throw my first one out, and that's just thinking a little bit about the process that you go through to essentially elicit some of these inputs from your team. So I'm trying to think of techniques that we've had conversations with other people about, like Petra Willie's PM wheel and self-assessment. There's lots of different methodologies out there, but how do you like to go about that? Do you like to use a dedicated particular moment in time? Do you use your regular one-on-ones, a combination of different things? How do you extract that?
That's a good question. I think definitely if it's a new hire, I don't think there's any harm or it being odd to ask some very on-the-nose questions. What part of the job do you find most exciting? Think about your past jobs. Think about the projects you worked on. Name one project you loved and then tell me why. That's the easiest way to get them to start thinking about themselves, because a lot of people might not even be as self-aware as we even would like about this. Not everyone even can put their finger on, what part of product management do I find the most interesting? I never really thought about it. So you're right, Scott, asking the right questions and retrospective definitely helps. That's the simplest way I found to learn about someone's interests, and then similarly about strengths, right? Because again, it can be two different things about what they like and what they do really well. And those could be two different questions for sure. Think about past projects. What did you think you added the most value to versus which one did you enjoy the most? And they might be different answers, and that's just good to know.
Yeah, definitely. As part of the performance evaluation process, do you have things that you do to, again, extract some of that perspectives on that person or individual from either like the rest of your product team or even the rest of the product organization for that matter?
Oh, definitely. As part of reviews, you should definitely be talking to them about giving them like the 360 type review. What do you think you're doing? What's your strengths? What are you doing well? What are you not doing well? I am a big believer, and I think most people at this point have heard this, and whether they're putting it into practice or not, when you actually get to the point that you're doing your annual review, if you're telling them anything that's a surprise, you are not doing management at the right level. They should be surprised by nothing you tell them in an annual review, because this kind of feedback should be happening on an ongoing basis. Think about that and think hard about that. Anything you're telling them in the annual is almost like too late. That's not the right time. This should be stuff that you're telling them on an ongoing basis, reminding them, working with them on setting ongoing goals on how they can improve on these things. And that's also true of not just product, any role you're in. That should be a general, good, healthy rule as how you handle these feedback loops.
I want to think about this in the context of your role as a leader. And in particular, as a leader, often we don't have that support structure. We don't have that group of people that are asking us these questions, that aren't maybe helping us position ourselves around the things that we like and enjoy and are best suited to in terms of the work. What are some of the ways in which maybe we can extract that support or get that support as product leaders from the rest of our organization so that we're doing the work that we enjoy and working with our team in a way that we want to?
I volunteer the information to whoever I'm working for. I definitely tell them right out. I'm honest with them about what I like, what I don't like about the role, and like just be honest about what I'm good at and what I will probably not be doing maybe at the level you're hoping for. And I say to them, I am always trying to improve and do better on these things, but I just want to be honest with you so the expectations are appropriate and you don't get upset when you see me not crushing something, right? Like not doing great at something. And I have no problem. I'm confident enough in what I'm good at that I'm not afraid to talk about what I am not good at and what I don't enjoy, and making that obvious to whoever I'm working even with or for or laterally. And I even admit the same thing to the people that work for me, to make them comfortable in not being perfectionists and thinking they have to be superhuman beings. I have no issue sharing what I don't like and what I'm not good at. Not a problem. And I think I found it super helpful actually, because it makes people more comfortable also around you that you're willing to share this with them. It has a huge effect of relationship building.
Yeah, definitely. I know lots of leaders too that leverage things like readmes to put that kind of information out on the table for their new teams or the teams they're joining or the teams that are working with them. Question here, what approach would you suggest if you notice two engineers that don't get along or are dysfunctional within team, but you're not the team or group lead and cannot actively change the team setup?
Okay, it's a fair question. You're right. When the engineers don't report to us, which is probably the common dynamic in the product management world. And now dysfunction means a lot of different things to me. So I think understanding maybe the type of friction that you're seeing, but as the product person on the team, of course, I think bringing this to the attention of whoever their management is can be an obvious answer, but you'd be shocked at how often I've run into this situation where the manager didn't really know. And I'll tell you why, because either the manager's not a great manager, like I mentioned, not all engineers are good managers. They're not good people person. They don't recognize this. They don't understand personality dynamics, and they just aren't good at it. So by bringing it to their attention, you might be doing them a world of service just by bringing it up. Number two, the other thing is they may know about it, but maybe a little bit of suggestion from you about, hey, can we either, figure out, let's look at it together. Okay, why are they not getting along? Or can we pull them apart? Maybe they're never going to get along. And the idea is, can we maybe keep them in the same team and put them on as much unrelated stuff as possible so they're not interacting as much? Or is it so bad that maybe you got to make a suggestion of team realignment, which I don't love for all the obvious reasons, but maybe that can be the right answer. And as the product person interacting with your engineering management peer, don't be afraid to have these conversations with them about their people. I guess there's nothing wrong with that, because you may know things they don't know about what's going on in the dynamic.
Great answer. I think that's it for the Q&A that I can see at the moment. So I think we can probably wrap things up for today. Thanks very much again for that and the great insights that were shared. I'm just going to pass along here a few closing slides. We'd love to get your feedback on today's event. If you want to share your feedback, there's a link inside the chat there that I've shared. And you want to continue the conversation or some questions that come up afterwards, feel free to ask them inside our community. We'd be happy to have Jordan answer them there. There's lots of different stuff going on in the community, events, lots of different programs, including our mentoring roundtables, book clubs, and workshops. And we have some meetups as well, starting shortly with our different groups in our Meet channels. We have lots of different events coming up. Next week, we're talking to David Subar, the week after, Becky Pearson Davidson. And with that, thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time out. And thank you, Jordan, for sharing your insights and wisdom and experience on this topic. I think hopefully some people can take some of the things back and get the most out of their product teams.